Coming up on today's Locked On Big Ten, Isaiah Hole from Locked On Wolverines is in to answer the questions, how could COVID-19 affect this college football playoff? The whole Michigan team got boosted yesterday. The Georgia team has some positive cases coming in. We're going to break it all down, including the new policies from the college football playoff in just a minute. You're listening in to Locked On Big Ten.
You are Locked On Big Ten, your daily podcast on the Big Ten Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Big Ten, everything you need to know about the conference every weekday, Monday through Friday. I'm Nate Dickinson. We're joined on a Thursday episode by Isaiah Hole of Locked On Wolverines. His football team's getting ready to try and win a national championship. Basketball team still trying to figure things out, but we're talking about the football side of things because as we're still more than a week away from getting to that national semifinal game, Isaiah, there's a whole lot of stuff going on surrounding the situation in COVID-19 and all of that. We're going to get to that later on in the show here with Isaiah. But thanks again for coming on. How you doing here on Thursday? As we were kind of talking before, it's been a little bit of a lull. At least some news is getting back up here with Michigan, despite it being a little bit concerning as far as this game goes.
I just have no idea what day it is now that we don't have our normal schedule. It always happens every year, and I'm never prepared for it. But if you would have told me today was Saturday or Thursday, today is Thursday. I was going to say we're Thursday. I'd believe you. I have no idea what's going on, but all I know is leaving for Fort Lauderdale in 3 days. Christmas is apparently in 2 days, so it's all starting to happen now.
Yeah, it is. It goes by fast. And again, that game, obviously, on New Year's Eve, we'll talk about more in just a minute. I wanted to start with some other Big Ten news. The Gator Bowl looks like it might have a Big Ten participant now. Texas A&M has to back out of that matchup. So it appears, as it was reported last night, that Rutgers is going to take over that spot, and the Big Ten is going to get a 5-7 bowl team here. Obviously, we don't know anything about like what went into this decision and getting Rutgers in there, but why put this 5-7 Rutgers team in over anybody else who was sitting at home waiting?
I know part of it is based on team APR. It's about finding a team that has those good academic progress rates, and Rutgers certainly would be one in the Big Ten that would have that. Once all the 6-6 teams are taken up, you look for 5-7 teams, and so you have Rutgers, Illinois. Then I'm sure there's others across other conferences. But good for Rutgers because they were on the precipice. It was unfortunate that the season ended up going the way it did after a 3-0 start. Kind of felt like, all right, they're halfway there, but then they had that brutal stretch against Michigan, Ohio State, Michigan State. And that's pretty brutal playing against a college football playoff team, which actually was the closest of their three, and then 2 New Year's Six bowl teams. So kind of surprised that they laid some eggs here and there down the stretch, but good for them. And I think the big challenge for Rutgers now is they haven't been preparing for a bowl game. Now they've got a week, they haven't even officially accepted as of us talking about this right now. At least they haven't announced it. So it's a matter of not only them accepting, but then getting to work, and they have a week to prepare. They aren't getting the same benefits as some other teams that have been practicing for weeks now.
Yeah, it'll be tough for that team to try and switch things around and get back really into the mode of, honestly, not even just getting prepared to play this game on short notice, but getting prepared to play football again. If you're not playing that bowl game, you're kind of thinking your season was over up until now. But anyway, we'll obviously have time to discuss all of that. Do we know anything about, like, as far as that APR stuff goes, like, does the Gator Bowl have all that much of a choice? Is there like a certain list of the top schools there that they can choose from? Or was it like just going to be Rutgers based on the numbers? Do we know any of that stuff?
I'm sure there's a pool of schools that they got to choose from, and Rutgers was one of the top ones. I don't know really the specifics beyond that.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, again, we probably never will when it comes to all that kind of stuff. But Rutgers is in. Another Big Ten team ends up bowling, which of course looks good for the rest of the conference. As far as the team still contending for titles, though, Michigan has a matchup with Georgia coming up in a little more than a week as you're hearing this now. But it looks like, as right now COVID is taking over the sports world again, things might start to affect the national championship run. We'll talk to Isaiah about everything and what all this can mean as both teams start to deal with this virus once more. It's coming up in just a minute on Locked On Big Ten. This is it, the putt to win the tournament. If you sink it, championship's yours. But as you're going down for the backswing, the visor falls over your eyes. Is this how you're running your business? With limited visibility because you're relying on old spreadsheets and outdated finance software. To see the full picture, you need to switch to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system to power your growth. With NetSuite, you can automate your processes and close your books in no time, while staying well ahead of the competition. Over 28,000 businesses already use NetSuite, so it has the new financing program right now for you to use with end of the year financing special right now again at netsuite.com/locked. Head over to netsuite.com/locked for this special one-of-a-kind financing offer on the #1 financial system for growing businesses. That's netsuite.com/locked. Thanks again for making Locked On Big Ten your first listen every weekday. Make sure to check out the Ultimate College Football Playoff Preview 2021 as well. Local experts, betting advice, and draft analysis. The most comprehensive college football playoff preview begins this Friday, just tomorrow. Welcome back into Locked On Big Ten. Nate Dickinson with you here alongside Isaiah Hole, the host of Locked On Wolverines. He's with us once a week, and on that show, Locked On Wolverines, every single weekday, Monday through Friday. Once you're done listening here, make sure to head on over and give a follow to Isaiah if you need to stay up to date on anything going on with Michigan. He, of course, has his finger on the pulse of all the stuff going on campus there, including this lead up to a national semifinal game against Georgia here next weekend, Isaiah. But things already starting to get active again right now, as we're kind of used to having this little bit of a lull while we wait for this game. It's starting to get back into the news again, thanks to COVID-19. And as a result of a whole lot of stuff going on, the college football playoff has at least announced some policies and new rules as to what exactly all this would mean if someone can't play or a team can't play. But at least where you're at right now on campus, I want to first get the Michigan side of things. They've had basketball games postponed. All this stuff's going on now with the football team getting boosted yesterday. And I guess just there locally on campus, what's the atmosphere like? What are people feeling like in how everyone's treating this thing that's reared its head again?
Well, I don't believe that many students are still around. So,
right. Yeah.
It's so right now the team is kind of naturally in a bubble. And when you look at the basketball team, like they canceled the game, not because of things that were happening in Ann Arbor, but things that were happening at Purdue Fort Wayne. So that's good news, right? It's not necessarily permeating through the basketball program. Football program hasn't had any anyone miss any practices or anything of that nature due to COVID-19. So they just recently, Andrew Stuber said on Tuesday that there was a team-wide vaccination happening on booster immunization happening on Wednesday. So I'm sure that went off yesterday. I don't necessarily have confirmation of that, but I'm assuming it did. So that they're still getting ready to as normal. They were given the option by the college football playoff to arrive on December 29th rather than being there by the 26th, but they're still keeping their plan of arriving on Christmas Day, even though everything else, they'll still have practices. I believe that most everything else is virtual. So that's kind of disappointing, at least from my perspective, obviously, as someone who's going and you go to a bowl game, you expect to be able to go and have your interviews and what have you. And everyone at the bowl game is required to be vaccinated as well. So it's a little disappointing that we won't be able to see these guys in person, except for the first 15 minutes of the two practices that we're allowed to attend. But they're going through it as if there's nothing that's changed, because for Michigan itself, nothing has changed. And they've talked about making sacrifices kind of similar to the lead up to 2020 and recognizing like, hey, if we want to win a national championship, we have to be able to field the team at full strength. Didn't just because obviously you've got the new college football playoff regulations that say that if a team forfeits, then that other team moves on, and so on and so forth. And but obviously, in order to beat Georgia, you're going to need all hands on deck anyway. So that they're doing everything due diligence and trying to make sure that they feel the full complement of the team. And it sounds at this point like it's going well for Michigan. Whereas with Georgia, JT Daniels tested positive. George Pickens reportedly tested positive as well. There's rumors that there's other guys that maybe have. So that's also a concern because you need Georgia to field a team as well, so otherwise the travel to Florida is all for naught. And, you want to be able to have all these things kind of work to work together. Michigan's got to be diligent. Georgia obviously has to kind of extricate those who are in protocol and just hope that they don't have any more.
BetOnline has you covered for the holiday season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football continues the march through bowl season and the pro football playoffs, of course. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the sports action this season, from basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet all your favorite sports, so don't wait to take advantage of the new amazing offers available. BetOnline, where the game starts. Are there any specifics as far as, when people read about these new protocols, that obviously big thing that jumps out at you is what you said, that there could be teams forfeiting games that ends up resulting in teams automatically moving on at this biggest stage. But as you got into it, and you were, again, writing on this for Wolverines Wire at USA Today, if you want to check out the other stuff Isaiah's up to, what exactly is it that it says about, are there numbers that go with this as far as a team going away? Does a team have to forfeit the game itself in order for that to happen? Can the NCAA force that upon a team? What's going on exactly with what was announced yesterday?
I believe, it's up to the team to some degree. It's about being able to have enough bodies to be able to field an actual football team, right? You're not going to go out there if you don't have a quarterback. You're not going to go out there if you don't have a defensive line or all it takes really is one position group to be completely depleted, and that can happen in a hurry, right? Because if you say you have two starting corners out, how many more corners do you have available? And were those corners in contact with anyone who tested positive? Are they in protocol as well? So it's that's where things get to be really dicey really fast. Is it doesn't take necessarily a ton. It just takes a one room essentially not being available. And if you're a team like Michigan or your team like Georgia, right now, I'd say it's, the losses they've had are relatively acceptable in the sense of if they can't play without JT Daniels or George Pickens. JT Daniels, who knows if he would have played at all anyway, because he's the backup quarterback. Certainly there was rumors that he was going to be more heavily involved in this game. And with George Pickens, he's only played in 2 games, had 3 catches so far because he's coming off a torn ACL. And he's still not 100%, so he's still kind of working his way back. So I think that those are, if you're going to have losses, if you're in that type of situation, losing guys that may or may not have played is one thing compared to guys who certainly that you're relying on. So it's a matter of trying to keep the most important, crucial components of your team healthy more than anything.
The biggest thing here, Isaiah, is that honestly, when I'm thinking about it right now, I don't see any way this game doesn't get played. But at the same time, I was thinking the same thing back in March about the NCAA tournament back in 2020. Where are you at right now about the prospects of this game potentially not happening, any games in this rest of the college football playoff, at least competitive season, not being able to take place?
I think it'll still get played just because one team canceled in Texas A&M. We've seen that type of thing happen. It's the first time I think it's happened really in a big way this bowl season. We've seen some. I know that was it USC had to play a game during championship week that was rescheduled. It's happened, right? It's not that I understand cases are rising and everything like that, but right now there's only one team that's had to pull out. It's not necessarily like it was at the beginning of the pandemic where one team having to cancel means the rest will. It's not that type of situation per se. It certainly is spreading again, but you also figure that most teams are vaccinated. A lot of them are boosted, as well, like Michigan just got. And obviously, it's going to take a minute for that to take effect and what have you. But yeah, nonetheless, you have to imagine that it's going to be a lot more difficult for the spread to infiltrate a team to that degree, like it did Texas A&M. It will happen here and there, but I would imagine that they'll find a way, to like as long as Georgia feels like it's got enough, it's going to play just like same with Michigan. It's a matter of this is the last type of game that you want to pull out of. It's not. I mean, you'd much rather play decimated in a college football playoff than even a New Year's Six bowl, because this actually means something. And what happens if somehow you just find a way? So I would imagine that I have no doubt that this game will take place. Certainly things can change between now and 8 days from now, but I fully expect that. I think that's also the reason why Michigan wants to get down to Florida as well, get in the warmer weather, where maybe spread isn't quite as bad as it is up here in the cold weather states at the moment. So that's also probably a big reason why Michigan wants to get down there, because it does help protect the team that much more.
Well, obviously, everyone's going to be doing everything they can to make sure that everything goes along smoothly. And we'll have one more time to talk to Isaiah about it before that game goes down on Christmas Eve. Isaiah, again, thank you for having your time with us here on Locked On Big Ten, as you do once a week here on the show. We'll be back next week, obviously, to preview a whole lot more going into Michigan and Georgia as the Wolverines try to take home a national championship for the Big Ten. That's, again, coming up next week. We'll have another show here tomorrow to wrap up this week. Until then, Isaiah, thanks for coming on. We'll talk to you again soon.
All right. Thank you.
Hey, thanks again for making Locked On Big Ten your first listen of the day. Tomorrow, we've got Matt Sheehan on to chat about everything going on this weekend in Big Ten sports. We'll catch up with all the news that we may miss over the course of today with him, as well as give you some bets on games that already happened. We're talking here actually on Thursday afternoon in a little bit. I'll be chatting with Matt, so we're going to be predicting games that actually already went down, and you'll be able to know real time. Well, not real time, but when you hear it, whether or not we actually got our picks right, because you weren't really actually betting on those picks anyway. So we'll talk to Matt more about that later on, and you'll hear about it tomorrow on the show. Until then, Nate Dickinson here with Locked On Big Ten. Make sure your second listen is Locked On Bets, your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. Locked On Bets, hosted by your boy Q, with expert analysis from Lee Sterling. It's free and available on all platforms.